So in this video, we will see how to load book records into an Excel table. And this is especially useful when you are working with hundreds or maybe thousands of records to be included into a single table. The traditional approach is very time consuming and not too much efficient since it can lead to errors caused by API throttling limits. But before we get started, if you want to learn more about Power Automate, Office scripts, and other Power Platform features, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. So let's say that you have an array of objects and you need to add all of these objects as new records to an Excel table. How would you do that? So if you are new to Power Automate or if you are working with only a few dozens of records, you probably would take a strategy very similar to this one, where we are basically using an apply to each to loop the array, and then inside this loop you have this add a row into a table action to include the individual entries to the table. In this particular example, we are running this loop only to 200 records extracted from this array of objects, which has a total of 5,000 records. And then here we are simply matching each of the properties to the columns of this Excel table. But the problem is, if you come here to the flow run page, you see that this process is taking almost 12 minutes to loop all of these 200 records. And actually, we are even working here in the apply to each with this concurrency control. So we are basically running 20 loops iterations at the same time, and it's still taking close to 12 minutes to finish all of these 200. Even if you increase the speed of this task in 10 times, it would still be very time consuming. So what if you wanted to actually load to this table all of these 5,000 records and not only these 200 first ones? How much time would it take, even if you increase this concurrency control from the apply to each loop? So in that case, you would prefer to use an Office script instead of the default add a row into a table action. And if you are unfamiliar, the Office scripts are like the VBA for Excel, where you can automate your regular Excel tasks, things like adding values to individual ranges, merging ranges, formatting individual cells, and even adding book records to an individual table. So let's jump back to Excel to see how can we create those Office scripts. And here you can see that I am under this Automate tab. I will now click here into New Script. And this is where you write your Office scripts. This code over here is written in TypeScript, which is a very popular programming language, and you can learn more about this topic in our YouTube channel or in the Digital Mill website. Right now, you can see that we already have a simple code over here. This is generated by default only to showcase to you how to use these automations in Excel. And we can delete the simple code over here. The first thing to do is to reference this table, which is named reviews, since we are storing here data related to reviews made by users to an individual product. And then let's assign this table reference to a variable in our code. Let's use the const reserved word for that, and let's call this variable as table, simply like that. And then you assign the value of the workbook object, which references this whole Excel file. And then we use the get table method. And between the parentheses, we simply pass the name of this table, which is reviews. Now we can add new records to this table. And for that's pretty straightforward, actually. We simply have to pass the reference to this table, add a dot over here and select the add rows method. Be careful to select the add rows in plural, since we want to include multiple records to this table in a single step. And then we open the parentheses, and right now we are first expecting under which index or under which position of this table would you like to include those new records. In my case, I'll simply pass null because I'm not worried with the position. I just want to add it to the end of the table. And then the second parameter is basically the values that you want to add. And for it, we need to pass an array of arrays like this one here. Each of these internal arrays will represent an individual row to be added to this table, so you can have as many as you want. And the position matters. So for the ID column, for example, we need to pass as the first element of this array. So let's say 23 as an ID record. Then we have the username. Let's put something like Rafael, and I'm putting between quotes just because this is a string. Then we have the rating, let's say 5, and the review, let's say amazing. All right, so I can add a few other records as well. So let me put here, great, a few more. I'll just change the ID number from here. And now if we run the script, you see that it was pretty quick. And if you go now to the end of this table, you see that we have here those three new records corresponding to the values that we passed under this add rows table. But we have a problem here because we are not receiving the data into this format of a two-dimensional array. If you come here and check sample of the first record retrieved from this JSON, you see that we actually have an ID, username, rating, and review properties, matching exactly to those properties from this Excel table. So we need to find a strategy to convert this specific format, so this array of objects, into an array of arrays that matches the same position from these columns into our Excel table. And for that, I already have here, copied from another screen, this sample data corresponding to an array of objects containing a few properties. The values are just ones and two, as you can see here. And I will assign this array of objects, in this case we have only two objects, to a variable called sample. Now, to convert this array of objects into an array of arrays, we need to simply use the map method that is default from arrays in JavaScript to this sample variable. So simply put a dot over here and select map. And then we open parentheses. We have a lot of information here, but to keep things simple, we just have to pass an arrow function inside this parentheses over here. And if you don't know how to work with functions in Office scripts, I'll leave a link to a blog about this topic in the Digital Mill website. And here we'll work with an arrow function, so simply pass object as parameter, use the arrow, and then here as a return from this arrow function, I will simply have an array. And inside this array, I will reference each of the properties from this sample data. So here we have ID, user, rating, and review, matching exactly here to ID, username, rating, and review. And here I have object.id, so I'm accessing the individual property from this object, then object.user, object.rating, and finally object.review. So at this point, we are simply taking all values from here, converting it from an array of objects to an array of arrays, and we just need now to assign this array of arrays to a variable. So let's call that rows, simply like that. And then here into our table add rows, we'll simply remove everything from this simple data and add the rows variable as input. So now we can run the script again, and you see that now we have this array of objects included over there, since we converted that before to this array of arrays. And if you keep running that, you'll see that we'll keep including this data into this table. So that's amazing, but we are not currently pulling data from Power Automate. So we are not expecting you to copy data from that huge JSON file and paste it here under this conf sample. So instead of doing that, let's simply remove the sample data from here. And then here in the parameters, we simply add a new argument to this function main. And this argument is basically what we are expecting to receive from Power Automate. In this case, as I told you, we are expecting an array of objects similarly to our sample data. So simply that's here records. You can set any name as you prefer. I will name it as records because it is important to assign a meaningful name when possible, since it's the same name that will appear in Power Automate when we are populating the run script action. And then I need to pass the data type corresponding to this record. So what I'm expecting, is that a string? Is that a number? Is that a Boolean value? And in this case, we're expecting an array of objects. So I'll simply pass object here and open this array to say that this is an array of objects. Now under this rows property, instead of passing the sample as a parameter, we simply pass the records. So I'll copy here and paste it here. And one important thing is that the property user doesn't exist into our data. I can tell that because I have this first record just to check the properties. The data is actually called username, so I'll set username here instead of user. And you see that we have these errors over here. Don't worry about it. That's just because Office scripts don't have any information about the objects coming from Power Automate, like it had for the sample data created within our code. So it's retrieving these warnings by default, and you can ignore it. And this code will be enough to receive that huge array of objects from Power Automate, transform that into an bidimensional array, and then load it into this table with this rows method. So final things to do here, I'll simply change the name of the script to something like add multiple rows table. And then I will clear this table over here so you can see in practice how this process will work. So now we are good. Let's come back to Power Automate. I will start by getting rid from this apply to each. That's useless. And then I will insert a new step over here. This step is called run script. I'll select it here. You then need to populate the data related to the Excel file where you want to run this script. So I will select it here. My file is called product reviews. So it's under community. And then you have a list of all of the scripts available in my organization. In my case, I have to use this add multiple rows to a table. So select that. And after a few seconds, you can see that this new parameter is appearing over here. It is expecting an array of objects, and I could be adding here any individual items, but honestly, we have 5,000. So I'll simply click here into this switch to input enter array. And then I will clear everything from here and simply pass the dynamic content corresponding to this compose JSON action, which basically contains my array of objects. So that's fine. I can now save my flow. I will then come back to the flow run page and I will resubmit this flow. So the flow is already running here. Let's see how many seconds it will take to run this whole script, including 5,000 records into this table. And as you can see here, it took only 11 seconds. So basically, while we were working with almost 12 minutes to include only 200 records into this Excel file, the run script action can add much more records to that in only 11 seconds. And now, if you come back here to our Excel file, you'll see that we have many records over here. The last one is the row 5001. So we included here 5,000 records, as you can see from the count. So that's how you add book records to your Excel table without necessarily using a loop, without consuming a lot of resources and having the risk to face any throttling limits from the API requests. So thanks for watching. If you think this video was helpful, please like it and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.